Greetings, everyone. Thanks for joining me for this session. We are continuing to work through vertical marriage. Chapter 7, we've been talking about resolving conflict. And previous couple of sessions, we talked about growth through adversity, covered that principle, and then we talked about the various models or choices in conflict that we have. And I encourage you as couples to discuss just how your tendency is, what your tendency is to resolve conflict and to work on those areas. Now, one area we're going to cover today is the section entitled, "The Enemy is Not Your Spouse." The enemy is not your spouse. So this model, I first read about this in the marriage book called Love and War, written by John and Stacy Eldridge. And they created an excellent video series based on this book, Love and War, which we've used extensively over the years with married couples. Really, really good material. And so the enemy is not your spouse. So, irritations are normal in marriage, as we've said before, and they appear every now and then. Little speed bumps that just kind of pop up. And the thing that we need to be aware of in this area is not forming agreements about our spouse or not agreeing with the accusations that we hear coming in our mind about our spouse. And this principle, of course, applies to any other area of relationship with any other person in your life, whatever it might be. You hear things about people, maybe from other people, which is like gossip and slander, basically. But it doesn't come across that way. And so you hear things, and then you start dwelling upon it, thinking about it, and that becomes a stronghold. It becomes set in your mind as your opinion about that person. And then that's the filter or the lens that you see that person through. So we want to be careful that we're not entertaining unhealthy, filters or looking through unhealthy lenses at people. But here's an example that they give in their book, Love and War. So a husband's running late. He's trying to head out the door, for work. And he really doesn't have time for a conversation. He's not in the mood for a conversation. And his wife is asking him questions as he's moving towards the door. Of course, this scenario could be reversed, where the wife's trying to get out the door and the husband's trying to ask the wife something. Okay, same thing. So he's clearly, in this scenario, giving her body language, jingling his keys, looking at his car key, starting to move towards the door. But she keeps talking as he heads out the door. And even as he's going into the door, opening his door, she's still talking from the front door of the house. He can barely hear what she's saying, but she's still continuing to engage him in conversation, and not really respecting his need to go, right? And he tried to tell her, I really got to go. So as he drives down the road, the little voice he hears in his head is like, she's nagging me. I hate when she nags me. I hate when she just doesn't respect me when I tell her I can't talk right now, but she keeps doing it. She keeps doing it. And so then that's where, again, spiritual warfare comes into play. Not sure exactly of the mechanics of how all this works, but we do have an enemy, a spiritual enemy, who has the ability, clearly, we're told this clearly in Scripture, he has the ability to plant thoughts in our minds of accusation and of temptation, right? So that's why we need to really be discerning when we hear thoughts or, little kind of voices in the back burner of our mind, and like, well, where's that thought coming from? And so he then attacks this husband in our story and just kind of pours it on like, she's always nagging you. And so you hear that little voice like, yeah, she's always nagging me, it's always been like this, remember? And then he brings up, different occasions. So the husband remembers, oh yeah, last month this happened, 6 months ago this happened, or whatever. And then the enemy just pours on, puts gas on the fire. It's never going to change. He whispers in the husband's ear, it's never going to change. And so he's hearing these things. And again, this is just one tiny little scenario, but in counseling marriages over the years, over the past 35 years, wow, we've heard a lot of stories, and 80% of the time, there's scenarios that could be avoided and that there's victory readily available. Maybe 20% of the time it's an extreme case where it really is the spouse that's become an enemy. But most of the time, it's in the realm of accusation, really. And so, if this is left unchecked and kind of remains as an accusation, it can produce a tiny hairline fracture in the foundation of your relationship, through which other things can then infiltrate and seep in. I'll give an example in the chapter of our book of a little story from our life where we were getting ready to go out on our weekly date, and I heard Anne jogging on our little mini trampoline that we have, our little mini rebounder that she uses to exercise on. So I was upstairs in the living room. I heard downstairs in the family room the trampoline going. So I thought, oh, she's jogging. She usually jogs for maybe 20 minutes. So I'll just read a book while I'm waiting for her. So she comes upstairs and asks if I'm ready to go. And so I said, yeah, I was just waiting for you. And her response was, oh, well, I saw you reading a book on the couch, and so I thought that I would, use that time to exercise until you were, done reading and ready to go out on our date. So far, nothing's really happened too negative, but all of a sudden, a switch was thrown where something rose up in me. I became irritated, and I said, no, I was waiting for you. And she then countered with whatever the exact words are, I don't know, but basically the gist of it was, no, I was waiting for you. And so all of a sudden, the fire gets lit, and we're having a mini argument over who was waiting for who. So we're going to go out on our date, even though there was something between us now, a little wall sprung up. And I was going downstairs, and I realized I had to go back and get my car keys, which I left on my dresser. So I go back upstairs, and as I'm going to get my car keys, I'm just mumbling out loud, she's always got to be right. She's got to win all the time. She's always got to be right, always got to be right. So I was really starting to make an agreement. I was starting to listen to an accusation, right? Not blaming this on the devil. I'm not sure where it came from. Maybe it was partially the enemy, partially me, probably. And so we got in the car, and we weren't talking to each other. We backed out of the driveway, both just frozen in ice, not looking at each other on our date night, right? And so within a mile of driving, probably half a mile of driving, we both kind of just smiled and said, this is so stupid. Let's just pray. Let's just take authority over whatever's going on here and break this thing off. And so we did, and it was gone, and we had a great night. So the enemy's goal will always be to redefine your marriage. And again, not to give him credit, but because of his activity, which he is very skillful in, and because of the propensity of sinful man, anywhere between 30 and 50% of Christian marriages are not working. They're failing. They're ending in divorce. So something's wrong here. And so the solution is very simple. It's to kind of keep the slate clean from day to day, from week to week, and make sure that you're thinking properly about your spouse, or if you're engaged, about your fiance, and listen to the negative accusations, the sentences that slip in, or the phrases that slip in. Remember, the words always and never are usually included in those sentences, and these accusations can come up in any area of married life. In your spiritual life, maybe one partner doesn't have the same outlook on spiritual things as the other, or one seems to be more zealous and more committed, in this season to spiritual things, and so the other kind of, makes accusations in their mind against that person and kind of classifies them as a certain way. And there's, in the sexual area, in the bedroom, just in conversation, in the emotional connection between spouses. Every venue, every sector of your marriage is prone and will be under attack in some way. So how we think is critical. Perhaps the most well-known scripture verse is in 2 Corinthians 10:5, where we're told to cast down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Love that scripture verse. It's one of the first memory verses I learned as a new believer. Bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. So, Lord, how do you see my spouse? How do you see my fiance? And the words that I'm hearing in my mind right now, are they from you? Probably not. Okay, I'm going to take these thoughts captive. I'm going to break any agreement I've entered into in the way that I think. And a sample prayer that we have in our manual is just quite simply, Jesus, forgive me for giving place to this in my heart. I just reject this agreement. I renounce it. I break agreement with the lie that Anne has to always be right, referring back to my story. And so I just break this agreement. I ask for your light and your truth. Help me to see things as you see them. So thanks for joining me, and God bless you today.